So, good evening, dear colleagues. Good evening, Chris and Marta. Thank you for bringing your contribution and your time and your attention to this meeting. We are very honored at EAMBA to have Chris and Marta here. They almost have MSc written on their forehead if you look closely. Um, and it's a joy for Ayamba to welcome you and to welcome all of you who are probably also involved in compassion and self-compassion. Tonight, we will explore that in a specific way. But before I get into that, for those who are here with us for the first time, I would like to repeat a few things about Ayamba and Ayamba Exchange, and then say a few words about Chris and Marta. And then Teresa, my colleague in Ayamba Exchange and also a board member, like Dalida, who's also present. Teresa will take us on a small journey to land in this meeting and be together in a close way. So to return to Ayamba, Ayamba is a collective of collectives. The collectives are the teacher associations in the various countries. We now have 34 members in various countries. In some countries like Italy, Belgium, and France, we have 2 members because the national association is not something that is really helpful anymore. By the way, also in Spain, we have 2 members. And we acknowledge that people are so far away from each other that sometimes it's better to have 2 or more associations so people can also connect on the personal level. So EYAMBA is a plural. The acronym is European Associations, and it's not European anymore. It used to be European until about 2 years ago. But then Israel joined us, Lebanon joined us, Turkey, South Africa, USA. So we are going more towards international or global or whatever you would call that. And the joy is that we connect all those colleagues. We are a community. That is one of our pillars. And within that community, we build connection. And that connection is expressed by supporting each other, by helping each other when someone needs things to get on in their own association or to deliver. Like the Portuguese colleagues help the Ukrainian colleagues get on quickly to present, to have a program for schools. So these kind of things are helpful for all of us in the EYAMBA associations. The local associations connect about, in total, all over Europe, US, and South Africa, and the Middle East, about 6,000 teachers. So it's a substantial amount of people that are connected and that could benefit from EYAMBA. But very often you see the usual suspects traveling and or participating in the EYAMBA Exchange events. And that brings me to EYAMBA Exchange that was founded when when Corona started. Because then we had teachers who were asking what to do and how to teach, or they could not be in person. But ever since, we have pivoted from only helping people in a technical way to make it a platform where we honor continuous learning. We support each other in that continuous learning. We do intervision. We bring in guest speakers and experts who then often become participants in the EYAMBA community. This is already an invitation. Marta is already in the community, but also to Chris. And all of you who are not yet in the EYAMBA community, please consider to look at your local association, become a member there, because then you can benefit from all the EYAMBA services. Tonight is one of such events where EYAMBA Exchange, we typically organize 1 to 2 meetings a month. We will have another one next week. And there we listen to experts, can be from the community, can be from outside the community, who speak to a topic that is really relevant to mindfulness and compassion teachers. So it's not a general community, it is specifically for teachers. And we invite the teachers themselves also to give back to our guests, the presenters, who put time and effort and attention into the presentation. And please give back generously with your experience, because Chris and Marta can benefit from you, what you experience in your territory. They're writing books all the time, so that can inform what they are writing and then bring their wisdom to that. With this, I would like to especially welcome you, Chris and Marta. Chris is probably known to all of us because you have written quite a few books on self-compassion, also with Christine Neffs. You are a lecturer in psychiatry and psychology. You travel the world. We have probably seen you in our territory. So you hardly need any introduction, but I do invite you in your presentation, please say the words that we need to know to understand better what you're doing. Tonight, specifically, you will also explore together with Marta how self-compassion is an antidote to trauma. And we are very much looking forward to that. Also, Marta's forehead, I can now read it, says MSc. You have done that in Spain and in Latin America. So you are really a pioneer in bringing this to the Spanish community, or let's say the Spanish-speaking community. And you and I have known each other for, I think, 12 years, because we were together when Eyamba was still a network. And I remember you and Louise very well, but it's a joy to see you again. So thank you, Chris and Marta, for being here. Thank you, dear colleagues, for coming here and taking an evening out on this holiday weekend. I just discovered 2 hours ago that's Pentecost, so I will go and celebrate this weekend. Thank you for being here. And with this, I would like to pass over to Teresa to put the antidote to my quick speaking, and we land very, very slowly.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Teresa.
Thank you, Katerina, for this incredible introduction. And I welcome you. Yeah, I'm Teresa. And yeah, I invite you, maybe we're all mindfulness teachers, so we more or less know what to do. But I invite you to find a posture which is a compassionate posture to your body. And you can close your eyes and soften the muscles of your shoulders. And pausing to notice what helps me to land right now. Maybe it's a touch on your legs or your chest. And after so many words, we sit in silence in the warm. I invite you to drop your feet into the ground. And maybe softening those parts of the body that are in resistance, maybe your intention. And if you wish, you can allow a couple of very deep breaths, spacious breaths. Inviting the body to soften. And with a very slow pace, I invite you to open your eyes and listen with the body the words of wisdom that Marta and Chris are going to share with us. And thank you so much for being here.
So thank you so much for that, Teresa, and for your beautiful introduction, Katarina, and also for this invitation. Also, Dalida, who connected us, and so Marta and I are just delighted to be here, be part of this community, and I just love the vision of Ayamba, to support one another and linking people of similar mind throughout the world. It's fantastic. And it's happening organically. That's the most beautiful thing. I want to first invite Marta to say hello before I start talking, because she's 50% of this presentation. Marta, can you say a few words?
Of course, I'm very happy. I'm very happy to be here again with my friend Katarina. I'm very proud of how Iamba has evolved. Please let me know if the connection is right. I can improve it because I'm in the mountains now on my retreat, personal retreat place. And I'm very happy finally at last to be here with Chris. Yes, introducing how powerful is self-compassion as an antidote to shame. So thank you so much to all the team, to the board members, and especially to Katharina and Dalida for the invitation.
Yes. And also thank you to everybody who's here, because I didn't realize this was a holiday weekend, but it is a Friday evening in wherever we are, and you have chosen to come together for this purpose, especially this topic of shame. You know, most people would rather do anything than look at shame. So a lot of gratitude for that as well. So the plan is for me to speak for about 20 minutes on this topic, and then Marta will lead a practice, and then we'll have 15 minutes for breakout groups, and then we'll have an open discussion, Q&A, comments, and so forth. Okay? So as many of you may have already heard, if you know about MSC, is that I became interested in self-compassion through the door of shame back in 2006. So at that time, I'd been practicing mindfulness meditation for over 20 years, and I had a full 22 years since I graduated with a PhD in clinical psychology. And during that entire time, even though I was meditating, and a so-called expert in anxiety disorders, I suffered from public speaking anxiety, and it was pretty debilitating. And nothing helped until I went on a retreat, and Sharon Salzberg told me on the retreat to just sit on my cushion and love myself. In other words, just love yourself because you have difficulty with public speaking or you struggle with anxiety in general, and just drop any effort to solve it. In other words, front load kindness. Just love yourself. Just stick with that part, right? And so I started to practice metta meditation, particularly for myself. By the way, I'd been avoiding metta meditation for 20 years. But I decided, what the heck, and I started just being kind to myself, you know, may I be safe, may I be peaceful. And my public speaking anxiety vanished within 4 months after 22 years of suffering. And this was an amazing experience for me. And I discovered a few things. One thing I discovered was that I wasn't suffering from anxiety, I was suffering from shame. In other words, I had a fear, because I would give talks on mindfulness and I'd be shaking like a leaf. And so, you know, my fear was that people would think I was fraudulent or incompetent. Didn't know what I was talking about, because obviously I wasn't walking the talk. And so shame was my underlying problem. And what self-compassion did was, first of all, revealed the shame underlying the anxiety, but it also alleviated the shame behind anxiety even before I knew that I was struggling with shame. So this was really amazing to me. But what really made the biggest difference is when I started to think about this and like what happened, I realized that when we're in the grip of intense and disturbing emotions like anxiety, like shame, but also, despair and panic, often we first need to hold ourselves in kind of loving, mindful awareness before we can hold the experience. And this is when I decided to include specifically and explicitly self-compassion in my mindfulness practice. Because, as the research now shows, this combination of mindfulness and self-compassion is a powerful formula for regulating difficult emotions, especially when the emotions are intense and disturbing, like shame. Okay? And I've been interested in shame ever since. So this was in 2006, so 19 years. And, I co-created the MSc program with Kristen Neff in 2010. But in the last 3 years, some colleagues and I developed a new training, specifically 8-week training for shame, self-compassion for shame program. So, and also at the moment, I'm writing a book on self-compassion for shame. So this shame topic has basically been woven through my life, but shame has probably been there since very early on. So what is shame? So shame is probably the most difficult human emotion. And it's difficult because it feels awful, but it's also difficult because it's so hard to work with, because when we feel shame, we disappear. We go small, we go silent, we go away. And if we're not in the room, we can't work with shame. If there's no one there to work with shame, then shame just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And also what we resist persists. And since it feels so terrible, we do anything we can not to feel it. So that's the dilemma, Technically speaking, shame is there's a lot of research on shame, is a self-conscious emotion with global negative self-evaluation. So basically it means I'm imagining in my mind what you are imagining about me, and it's not good. And what's not good is all of me, So the best way to think about shame is in contrast to guilt. So guilt means I made a mistake. Shame means I am a mistake. Guilt means I have a problem. Shame means I am a problem, But what's interesting is that we rarely experience pure shame. Shame is often mingled with other emotions. So for example, please raise your hand if, I'm looking at sort of everybody in the room right now, if you know somebody in your life who seems to be angry all the time, and you scratch your head and say, why is this person so angry? I wish they would be less angry. Do you know anybody like that? If so, raise your hand. Yeah, so most people do, So once we know about shame, the invitation is look for shame. Often behind chronic anger is chronic shame. In fact, getting angry at other people is like a courageous uprising in defiance of the self-attack that is going on. So what shame actually is a self-attack. And it also is, it hides behind anxiety like it did with me for 20 years. It hides behind, in some cases, grief. Sometimes people are actually not grieving a loss. They're just beating themselves up about the loss. So it seems to last forever. So shame makes other emotions sticky, And And we pay a high price for shame. Shame can be mild, which means that we are not, when we step into the world, we're not fully ourselves, not as authentic or as fulfilled or as we wish to be because we're hiding. But it also is a part of just about every clinical diagnosis that we have: anxiety, depression, substance abuse, personality disorders, and so forth. If it's not a cause for the problem, it's usually a consequence. So shame makes a lot of emotional difficulties sticky. And by the way, I'm just sort of laying all this out in a general way, and then my hope is in our conversation that we can discuss how the value of this and how to integrate this into teaching mindfulness, okay? So we'll save that part for the discussion. But just a few more points about shame. We're all born with the capacity for shame. And this is because it's built in through evolution, because shame helped to keep groups together, of humans together, in order to cooperate and to survive, right? However, and that's called state shame. That's not so bad because it comes and goes. But there's another kind of shame called trait shame, which is the shame that we carry around like heavy luggage everywhere we go. It's also shame proneness. It kind of makes us, it makes little things become shameful things. You know, like if somebody ghosts us, if somebody doesn't respond as we would expect, then we blame ourselves. Why? Because of an underlying shame. That's trait shame. But the interesting thing about trait shame, and this is really the so to speak, the bad shame, is that we come by our trait shame honestly. Trait shame is the result of how we were treated by others, either in childhood or in our culture. And it is internalizing patterns of disconnection, and patterns of devaluation. And when that gets inside of us, then it has kind of a life of its own, and that's known as trait shame. But the most important thing to know about trait shame is that it's because it was the result of how others treat us. Even though it feels personal, it is not our fault. But it is our responsibility, because if we don't do something about it, we will suffer, and also the people around us will suffer. So we should be, it really helps to be able to identify shame and then to do something about it. But the good news is that actually the power of shame is mostly an illusion. It gets strong through avoidance. It's what Tara Brach calls the trance of unworthiness. And because it's an illusion, we can actually see through it to what it actually is. And compassion allows us to see through shame, to see something deeper about shame, something beyond the fearsomeness of shame. And when we do that, what we actually see is that shame is an innocent emotion. And I'm going to get back to that in a moment. But one of the main points Marta and I would like to make in this session is that self-compassion is the opposite of shame. You know, I'm a clinical psychologist, and to my knowledge, in the history of clinical psychology, we have not had a concept and a practice that is as perfectly designed to alleviate shame as self-compassion. Theoretically, self-compassion is an antidote to shame. Kristin Neff's concept of self-compassion has 3 components, and the opposite qualities of those 3 components are key aspects of shame. So self-kindness versus self-criticism. Self-criticism is a key aspect. Common humanity versus isolation, and mindfulness versus rumination. When we're stuck in shame, we feel isolated, we criticize ourselves, we ruminate. So Kristen didn't know anything about shame when she came up with the three-component model of self-compassion, which is used in most of the 9,000 studies on self-compassion. But it's a perfect opposite theoretically to shame. Self-compassion is opposite, but also empirically. The research is entirely consistent that people who are high in self-compassion are low in shame. And as we grow in self-compassion, which happens, for example, when we practice mindfulness, when we have successful therapy, as self-compassion goes up, our shame goes down. So it's really the opposite of shame. We've never had anything like this, so it's really great that we do now, you know? So let's do a little shame busting. So actually there are three parts to alleviating shame from a self-compassion perspective. The first is mindfulness. The second is self-compassion. And the third is working with backdraft, or the old wounds and difficult emotions that kicked up when we are mindful and when we're self-compassionate. Backdraft. We can talk about backdraft in the discussion part, but mindfulness is the first part. Mindfulness, as we all know, is being aware of what we're experiencing while we're experiencing it in a spacious and accepting way. So, as I said, one of the reason why shame is so powerful and sticky is because of avoidance. So mindfulness is the opposite, right? We're not turning away, we're turning toward. We look, but usually we actually cannot identify shame when we're feeling shame. So it's really helpful for any meditation practitioner, any meditation teacher, to know what the main red flag, the main signal that shame is in the house, that I'm feeling shame. So there are different ways that we can feel shame. One way is inner body sensations like flushing or a sense of sinking, or external expressions like averted gaze or slumping our shoulders. Mental signs like self-criticism or self-doubt. Also behavioral signs like sometimes we get agitated and we want to flee or attack, or we become like people-pleasing. So here's the question for you, and maybe you can put into chat. How do you notice when you feel shame? What's the main thing that makes that would enable you to say, shame, I'm feeling shame? If you could put that in the chat, that would be awesome. So I get harshly self-critical, thank you. Sink in the ground, that's mine. Teresa wrote that. I feel that sinking feeling. I just want to disappear into the ground. Red-faced, also another sinking inside, disappearing. Yeah, so, we say go small, go silent, go away. That's very common. But sometimes people become aggressive, hiding, yeah. So it's really helpful to know what that is so that you can respond with loving awareness, with a kind, mindful response like, shame. This is shame. I'm feeling shame. And then feel it in the body. And then respond to your body in a kind way. Marta is going to lead us in this practice very soon. But before I conclude, I'll speak just for another couple minutes. I'd like to share a key insight to working self-compassionately with shame. So as I said, shame gets its power from avoidance, and its power is mostly an illusion. So what do we discover about shame when we can see through the illusion with the eyes of compassion? In other words, what do we see when we look at shame compassionately? And what we see is the motivation behind shame, which is the universal wish to be loved. So since birth, in order to survive and also to thrive, we have wished and we have needed to be loved. When we're born, if we don't get somebody to love us, we can't survive. So what's shame? You know, shame is the fear that we will be considered unfavorably in the minds of others. So that's the fear. And the motivation then is the wish to be considered favorably in the minds of others, if not loved. So shame actually springs eternal because the wish to be loved springs eternal. And so we can use different words for this. You know, love is sometimes a pretty complicated word for some people, but you can find whatever language you wish. The wish to belong, the wish to be appreciated, the wish to be respected, the wish to be included, to be special, to be counted, to matter, you know, whatever word works for you. But to connect with that deep wish that we're born with and that we live with every moment of our lives is what actually allows shame to lose its grip. So shame can be considered like a coin with two sides. On one side is the pain of shame. And if in the midst of shame, we can turn over the coin and we could see the flip side, if we could see the motivation behind shame, in fact, if we can connect with the wish to be loved in the moment of shame, shame will start to dissolve because our awareness becomes very humble, very simple, and it narrows down this thicket of shame into something very simple. Just noticing, you know, I feel this way because I, like all beings, wish to be loved, wish to be connected. When we can see the motivation, this is an amazing thing, actually. When we can see the motivation behind shame, shame begins to dissolve. And this partly works because of common humanity. In other words, breaking out of the cocoon of shame and seeing the universality of shame as we connect with the universality of the wish to be loved. So shame is a very isolating experience, but when we connect with this wish, we're no longer so isolated. But it also works because the wish to be loved is an innocent wish. And it's very easy to be compassionate with innocent beings. If you think about it, who's easy to be compassionate with? With puppies, with children, with dolphins, you know, creatures that appear innocent, easy to love. And when we connect with our own innocence, by connecting with the wish to be loved, when we can feel that innocence, then even we, in the midst of shame, feel entitled to be loved. That's amazing because one of the hardest things to do is to love ourselves, especially when we feel shame, when we feel least lovable. But we can open the door to kindness and compassion. In fact, kindness and compassion becomes the only intelligent response when we can feel the innocence behind shame. Okay? So, that's all I'd say for now. Marta, I think it would be really nice if you could lead us in a practice so that some of these concepts, particularly the three components of self-compassion, we can experience them directly in the context of shame.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. So we really have a basic practice that is in session 1 of our new curriculum, Self-Compassion and Shame, the 8-week course, in which we work with the three components, with mindfulness, with common humanity, and self-kindness, but applied to our feelings of shame. Yeah. So this is a self-compassion break for shame, and my invitation is thinking of a situation, first of all, all of you, in which you felt somewhat ashamed or embarrassed, something like a 4 on a scale of intensity from 1 to 10, because we don't want you to get overwhelmed or to get really very difficult in this first experience with the three components. Yeah. So it could be something like maybe a situation like you may have overreacted to something, for instance, or you did something wrong in a social situation, or you felt ridiculous in wherever situation, or you said something awkward to someone, or maybe you were just tripped and fell in a public place. So these kind of situations that are happening in our quotidian lives. And the invitation is for each of you to bring a situation like this, a real situation that is probably recent in your lives. So please raise your hand if you already have the situation to work with in the practice. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. And now I'm going to suggest you to find a comfortable posture and maybe closing your eyes partially or fully. And perhaps you can start by taking a few deep, relaxing breaths. And the invitation now is recalling the event you have chosen, remembering what happened and how you felt. Remembering probably the situation, the people involved, the circumstances. And when you notice that you are feeling shame in your own way, try labeling the experience. Labeling the experience for yourself in a gentle and kind way. You can say something like, "Oh, this is shame. Aha, yeah, welcome, welcome again, shame." Perhaps saying something like, "Shame. This is how shame feels. Yes, this is it." And then dropping your awareness inside your body and see if you can notice how shame feels in your body. Can you identify where you feel shame the most in your body now? Allow your experience to be just as it is. Perhaps by making just a little more room, a little more space than usual for the experience of shame in your body. And if you like, you can also give a label to what you are afraid others might think about you or that you think about yourself. You might be thinking, I'm stupid, I'm a mess, I'm worthless, I'm clumsy. And if these labels are coming to your mind, please remember that these are beliefs. These are just all beliefs, thoughts, not facts. And that negative beliefs are part of the experience of shame. And perhaps by feeling shame, you are probably feeling also isolated and alone. That's the nature of shame. Isolation. But you are not alone. You are here. All of us are experiencing shame. Everyone feels shame. So we are here in common humanity. Shame is a universal emotion. Sharing our shame with everybody else. What we are experiencing now here is part of the human experience. Many people would feel just as you do in the same situation. And all of us need compassion because we suffer shame. So please consider for a moment that you only feel this way because you, like all human beings, just need to belong. Just need to be appreciated, respected, or loved. Whatever works best for you. Looking at the other side of the coin, they need to belong. They need to be loved. They need to be valued and included. Put your own words. And finally, let's see if we can respond to shame in a new way. Can you give yourself some kindness simply because you are having a moment of shame? The invitation now is bringing to mind a living being, a little child or a pet, a puppy, a loved one, or a very good friend, someone who has a lot of love and innocence. And please choose a being that is easy to love and be loved by. Imagine this loved one in your mind and allow yourself to receive a kind gaze from them. If you prefer, you can imagine yourself in a room with all the people who care about you. And receive all their compassion and a kind gaze. And next, please, may you place a compassionate hand on the part of your body that feels shame the most. And if you like, sending kindness through your fingers into that part of your body, the part that is holding shame for you. Or maybe gentle rubbing that part of your body. And finally, consider for a moment what you would most like to hear in a moment like this. Perhaps words of comfort or support. Something like, I'm here for you. I love you. I see, I know you are a good person. And repeat those words for yourself in your own mind, in your own way. And just take a final moment to give yourself kindness in the way that feels just right for you. Kind eyes, kind gaze, soothing touch, words of kindness, or all three ways at the same time. And when you are ready, yes, when you are ready, slowly open your eyes. And you can start stretching, slowly moving, allowing yourself to get out of the practice, slowly, softly. Perhaps just settling in the practice, in the experience, 1 minute. How it was for you, how did you feel, what happened. Yeah, you can write in the chat wherever you are feeling now after doing the practice. Consoling, soothing, guide. Move connected, very tender and vulnerable. Smiling inside, softer, warming and tender, softer, loving. Even forgiving. Wow. I can see you all the group. I mean, you are really practitioners. Yes, with the words you are sharing, you really got it. So thank you so much. I think we are not going probably to breakout groups. Don't know.
Yes. Thank you so much, Chris and Marta. Really grateful. We are 17 together, so we can all see each other on the screen. But I think breakout rooms give a certain privacy and possibility to have more space to talk. So if you want breakout rooms, how many do you want in a room?
No, normally we have
Three. Yeah.
two.
Three.
Three. Normally we have three in the course. Yeah.
Okay, then we create a rooms of 3. Let's see, that is 18. I'll make 6. So we have one group of 2.
Okay.
Opening. And what is the question that we, or the prompt that we are sending with the breakout rooms? I will already broadcast it, and then please wait to join the room until Marta or Chris have said what question are we going to take to the room.
So Chris, do you wanted to send
I would
some
suggest two
prompts?
things.
Yeah.
Two questions. One is, what was your direct experience of this practice? was there any aspect to it that touched you or moved you or found interesting? So one is an experiential question. And then the second question would be a prelude to a larger conversation, which is how does shame show up in teaching mindfulness, and how might self-compassion help our students to practice mindfulness more effortlessly and smoothly?
I didn't get all that. How does shame show up in the teaching practice?
Yeah, as teachers, as mindfulness teachers, how you know what is the role that shame plays in the teaching experience, either as teachers or for our students? And then the second part of that question is how might self-compassion help to make mindfulness practice smoother?
And how might MSC help to
To make the practice smoother. In other words,
make the practice smoother?
to alleviate the negative impact of shame.
Okay, I'll put those two questions into the broadcast. So when you go to your breakout room, you will have it there. Let me see, broadcast message. Okay, there we go. And how much time?
So
Yes,
15
Marta?
I
minutes?
think we said 15 minutes.
Mhm.
Yes?
Yeah, this is
So
what our thought
15,
was 15 minutes, yeah, if possible.
50 minutes in breakout rooms, and then we come back plenary. Okay, so please. Let's join.
And also, I've been put into a room, but when I'm in a room, then people don't talk. They just ask questions.
You don't join.
Okay, I just won't join. Yeah.
So are we left without getting into our room? I went into the room. I got sent
Bernadette,
in.
you are in room 4.
Yeah, I got put in and then I came out because I missed what you were saying because
Oh, but I put everything in the chat to the rooms.
great. But
So
that's
do you
probably
want
why
to
I
have
didn't
it
get in
again?
again. Yeah.
Look, I put it here again.
No, just put me back in the room.
Yeah.
That's okay.
And
Yeah.
can you see the
I can
text?
see it. Yeah, lovely.
Yes. So,
Yeah, Katharina, the
yeah,
same
you're in that room. And Adamor, you are in
room 2, same
room
thing.
2.
I went in a little bit early and came back out.
We were too
Okay.
enthusiastic. It said join and I clicked join. You probably did that too, Adama, did you? We're both Irish, so it must be something about being Irish. We're too enthusiastic.
Adamor, I will put you in room 4 as well.
Okay, thank you.
And then Bernadette, can you join or do you need me to join?
I need you because it's not inviting me. Because I did the same, yeah. So you'd have to invite me, I think.
I cannot put you in room 4 now. So let me see. I'll put you in room 5.
I was in room 2, so maybe she could join.
Yeah, because that was
instead.
Adamar's. Yeah, that was Adamar's room, I
But
think, as well.
now there's only Christine there. So I'll put you in room 5, Bernadette.
Oh, Christine's coming out again.
Yes. So I'll put Chris. So you can go to room 5. And Christine, you were alone.
I'm alone, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I will move you to another room. Let's
Okay,
see.
thanks. Yeah,
We've got room 6. So I
Okay.
will send you to room 6.
thank you.
There are only 2 people there. Can you see it? Yes. Okay. So we got all set. And I myself am not assigned to a room automatically. So if I would go, I would have to put myself into a room. But we are having our room here.
We have our own room.
Yes.
You're so good at this, Katerina. And
Well, we've done a
also,
lot of practice now, haven't we? Since Corona, and I've also played around with Google Meet and with others because people sometimes had hesitations of Zoom collecting the data, and then Zoom adapted that. So it's okay now. It's okay now. I will remove the spotlight so we can see each other. Can you see me? Oh,
sure,
wait,
yeah.
stop recording. So back to you, Chris and Marta.
Okay, well, we would love to have a conversation. Love to hear what your experience was of the practice, what your thoughts and reflections are in terms of teaching mindfulness. So anything anybody would be willing to share, it's a generosity. As Katerina said, it's certainly helpful to me as well when people share so I can learn, and I think it's part of our shared learning experience. So if you have anything you'd like to share, please raise your electronic hand, or in this small group, actually, you can even go like that. We'll see your hand, and then spotlight you and have a little chat. What was your
Actually, I
experience
will
like?
change the view because then we can all see each other and we can see your hand when you raise it.
Nice.
And perhaps, Chris, we are also open if they have any question about what we did and what you explained about shame.
Yeah, anything really. We're a small group. Let's
Yeah, so
just
we
let it
also
roll.
open to questions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Dear colleagues, I put the two questions in the chat again, so you don't have to search for the question if your head is full of what just happened. Yes, Dalida, please.
There is something I would like to just check in because even at the very beginning, when Chris, when you were asking about describing the feeling about the shame, and for me it came as anger and irritation, and that's somewhat new. But then in our group, when I shared I don't want to name the person, so I'll just say another female participant. And similar was shared that there was anger, and then shame was revealed, and then I had a bit of an insight on maybe I'm feeling shame because anger showed up, and just as like it's not okay for girls to get angry, a type of thing. And any thoughts on that? So it's kind of like the shame can be under, but can also follow a certain emotion and just be like to get into that cycle. So that's a bit of a new insight for me from today's practice.
Yes, absolutely. What you said is so true. When we've been socialized not to be angry, then we can feel shame about anger, or anger could be a defense against shame. Yeah. Sometimes anger is what we call a pure emotion and not a secondary emotion. Secondary means it's a defense. Sometimes it's pure. So, for example, when you're being threatened and we get angry, this is good. It's very good, it's self-protection. But then if we feel shame about that, then we actually start to diminish ourselves, and we also sometimes lose our ability to be safe because we're not allowed to be angry when we need to be angry. So it's always helpful to see the role of shame, because it then allows us to act in a way that is going to create the greatest benefit, the least harm. Yeah. Beautiful insight, Alita. Marta, you have some reflections on that?
That Dalida, we directly address how to deal with anger in the 8-week course on shame, and even how to use anger also in the way of fierceness, to protect ourselves when someone is really hurting us or shaming us. So it's also considered like a very useful emotion, and we try to teach our participants on how to deal with anger as a constructive emotion, as the basic energy to be fierce, to set proper boundaries, not to feel so ashamed by others, for instance, or even by ourselves, could be setting boundaries to ourselves.
Thank you so much.
Peter.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris and Marta. When I was sharing my experience, which was a bit higher than 4, I sort of experienced the sort of disappearing part, or the getting very small part. And I had just the idea of, is it linked somehow to the nervous system, like polyvagal, sort of you go into the dorsal vagus where everything is stuck, and you cannot move basically, and there is no energy to sort of to get out of this sort of difficult situation. Just you, what's your experience on that? Is there a link somehow nervous system wise?
Shall I start speaking, Marta?
Yeah, you can start and I will follow.
Okay. Yeah, so shame is a threat state. It's a threat state. It's a threat to our sense of self, just like a physical threat. And actually the mind doesn't discriminate all that well, the brain, between an inner threat and an outer threat, i.e. a threat to self or a threat to the body. But when we have a threat state, we have flight, we have fight, and we have freeze. Freeze means we shut down. And so definitely people can freeze. But what's unique about shame, I think, is that one aspect of freezing is dissociation, where people even have the experience of exiting their bodies. And one of the physical expressions, or you might say, red flags of shame, like how do we recognize it, is a sense of emptiness in the head, like a feeling of like no longer there. And one thing we also know is that shame is often a precursor to dissociation. So in this whole general realm of extreme fear, we have freeze, we have emptiness, we have shame, we have dissociation. All of that is extreme fear. The beautiful thing is that self-compassion actually allows us not to dissociate. And early on, when we started teaching MSc, a man came to me at lunchtime and with tears in his eyes, and he says, I actually dissociate from my body 3 to 4 times a day. And for the first time in my life, when I noticed myself starting to dissociate, I just started to gently rub my chest, and I stayed in my body. He was so happy, so touched that he had found a way of not, of downregulating his nervous system, and ultimately the reaction of the consciousness to that downregulation. Yeah. So, yes. Is it associated with the vagus nerve? Probably. One of the most consistent findings we know from self-compassion is that it increases self-compassion. A state of self-compassion is a state of higher heart rate variability, which is a state of enhanced vagal tone, Yeah. And vagal tone is associated with not just parasympathetic relaxation, but also the feeling of safeness.
Yeah. And you must know, Peter, that we are adding to our practices, and especially when we are dealing with shame, with a lot of safety instructions. And for our participants to take the shame course, they need to take previously the mindful self-compassion basic 8-week course. Yeah. So we don't go to this practice all of a sudden like this. With you, I trusted. But normally we have a previous practice with self-compassion, plus we are giving a lot of safety instructions just to be able to regulate all these states, the threat mode in the different states. So we are offering, we are saying in all the practices things like, if you feel comfortable with this part of the practice, please lean in, but you can lean back also, and just being with your breath, feeling the soles of your feet, anchoring in your soothing touch. This is enough, and don't listen to the instructions really, or you can even let go and stop doing the practice and doing something else. And this is also self-compassion. So being able to adjust the dose and to self-regulate, not really to be immersed all the time in backdraft or being stuck. This is the way we are working all the time.
I think this 3 Ls is a probably nice thing for mindfulness teachers in general. As Marta was saying, 3 Ls: lean in, lean back, let go. So we always have choice. If we feel safe, we can lean in and explore mindfully. If we're starting to feel challenged, maybe overwhelmed, we can lean back, as Marta said, feel your feet, breath, or we can let go, do something entirely different. All those moves are self-compassionate. Thank you for putting that in the chat. Lean in, lean back, let go. It's a wonderful acronym created by David Fredrickson in the SHAME program for maintaining safety. Safety.
Yeah, Katarina?
Yes, there's one thing I would like to ask as a teacher, which is shame or guilt. Don't really know which is which. Coming up with participants who come to the next session without having practiced as much as they thought they would, as they committed to the group, and then talking about that or camouflaging that. There are different ways of coping with it, but there definitely is something like guilt and shame underneath. So how are you and other teachers here coping with that?
Yeah, so that's the main way that I find shame coming up in classes is not practicing. And that's the main way that teachers feel shame, because they tend to be a little bit exaggerating about how much meditation they do every day, and they feel shame about it as well, but they continue to exaggerate how much they practice. And so they feel a little shame too. So there's shame around amount of practice, generally speaking, for both teachers and students. And yeah, I could say more about it, but give some space for Marta because we just have a few minutes left. Marta, what are your thoughts?
I just wanted to add, Marta, maybe you can speak to that. I feel guilty for not having done something that would help them to practice, and then they are ashamed about that. And it makes me feel guilty and ashamed because I tell myself that I was not good enough a teacher or stimulator to help them practice. So it's we are doing a circle.
And so we see that actually shame permeates the teaching landscape. This is just the tip of the iceberg, these 2 points you named, Katerina. And it's beautiful that you named them, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. When we start to feel shame, we will see it hiding in every corner of the room. Annalise is nodding her head, she knows. Marta, can you say something?
Yeah, go ahead, Annalise. Yeah.
I realized also working with elder people, seniors and elder people at this moment, not giving training mindfulness, but just trying to move with them, have dementia or not, but are beginning dementia. I am working with them, and I introduce the mindfulness, and it's quite new for them, but the reactivity is very high. And now I realize it's all about they're so joking with me and not taking it serious, and I feel it's so. And so there are people, they are coming to me, or partners from people, and say, hey, what are you doing with them? It's so good and it's so new, now it's calm and so on. So I feel it's okay. I will continue this process, but I realize now it's all about shaming. Yeah, it's my, and now that letting go or leaning back or leaning in, maybe that's a good anchor to work with them, I think. Yeah, because how to deal with their reactivity, that's not only resistance, but yeah, really this shaming, I think, about, yeah, I can do this. I can do this.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So finally, I would like to tell you, Katarina, about what you just brought about this guilty, that we start our MSc courses being sure that they are not going to practice. So our baseline, our expectation is normally they don't practice. Normally this is very difficult. They are not going to practice. So let's start exploring what are the difficulties for not to do the practice. So our baseline is very, very humble in that way. And this is allow us to really to build little by little, just like validating and creating a safety environment, saying, oh, the normal is that you maybe don't practice, right? This is happening, right? Yeah. So I would like to hear you why you are not practicing, what are your difficulties, and let's try to find how to really overcome these difficulties. And maybe I can help if you just tell me what's going on. What are your difficulties of not doing the practice? So because they don't practice wherever you do. they don't they practice. I mean, it takes a long time to build a habit, really solid habit of practice. I mean, formal practice. And what they do normally is really starting with very small informal practices. So as we know this, what we do is starting with a small informal practices and really motivating them when they are doing something informal, and just little by little trying to slip in the more formal and longer practices. But we know this takes a lot of time. It's not going to happen just because of will or striving.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. They need to find the real motivation. And for us, the motivation in self-compassion is you are going to practice because practice is how you love yourself. Practice is how you are nourishing yourself and taking care of yourself. So practice is really like going to an emotional spa. It's your emotional spa, yeah? Your emotional spa treatment, nourishing, taking care of you. And building this motivation, all the resistance or practice is being, dissolved. It takes time.
Yeah. Yeah. Very helpful. Very helpful. I don't know whether there is time for just one more question. Gilbert, were you moving to raise your hand? No? No? Dear colleagues, I would like to draw your attention to the meeting we had with Karen Atkinson because of what Marta just said. Karen Atkinson created a program that's also compassion-based. And the program especially distinguishes itself by offering 10 seconds to 10 minutes practices. So she identified exactly the problem that you just talked to, Marta, and she found a solution. And that program was also one of the winners of the of the Innovation in Mindfulness Awards in the UK. So that is in the history of Ayamba. And in the future of Ayamba, there is an upcoming festival on the 20th of September. And Chris will also be there with a colleague from Rwanda, where we have a festival that will address trauma-informed mindfulness and compassion. So if you're interested in this topic, and you are because you're here today, please mark your calendar already for the 20th of September. The first announcements are already on the Yamba website, and then make sure that you are there. And the least you will have is you see Chris again, and I think Marta will come. So make sure you enjoy and you stay connected in a consistent way. With this, I would, from the bottom of my heart, thank you, Chris and Marta, on behalf of Ayamba, but also on behalf of myself, because, or not on behalf, no, myself, I want to thank you myself, because I learned something from myself and my private situation tonight that is really, really helpful. Holding self-compassion and compassion for someone else together and turning around in 3 seconds, and then being able, from that moment of self-compassion, to extend compassion again to the other person. And thank you very much. With this, please, dear colleagues, next week we will have Alison from the UK on mindfulness in primary healthcare. Make sure you're there. It will be great.
My pleasure,
Thank
Katarina.
Thank you.